Now considered to be one of the world's leading experts on crime, American journalist Jeffrey Robinson's expose, The Laundryman, is a textbook on how hundreds of millions of dollars in drug money is legitimized through business and bankers. Now he's turned his attention to what he calls pretend currency with his latest book, Bitcoin, the naked truth about Bitcoin. I spoke to Jeffrey Robinson from New York earlier. Jeffrey Robinson, it's good to catch up again.
Always good to see you.
Now, I gather you've made your way onto the Bitcoin Foundation's top 10 most reviled list.
I did. My goodness, that's good news. I'm having T-shirts printed. I'll send you one.
What's gone under the skin of the Bitcoin faithful?
Me and the truth. I'll tell you what happened. About 2 years ago, I started hearing stories about Bitcoin and paid very little attention to it until somebody said, you know, it's really good for money laundering. And because I'd written so much about money laundering, I decided to look into it. As it turns out, it's not very good for money laundering, and it's not very good for much anything else either. Because what I've done is I pulled the curtain back and found out there isn't any there. You know, I checked all of the misinformation and all of the facts and all of the stuff that the Bitcoin Foundation puts out and all of the hype and all of the spin, and I just stripped it bare. And I was just shocked to find out so much misinformation and so many people are being misled that I decided it was time to tell the truth.
You say there's no there. I guess people use it to transact.
Do they?
And they're also looking for upside as a commodity, as a currency.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a pretend currency. And the transaction, now, if you listen to the Bitcoin people, they will tell you there are, 63,000 places around the world where you can spend Bitcoins. The problem is that very few people actually transact Bitcoins because most places don't take them. In fact, there are fewer people transacting with Bitcoins than there are members of the Kuwait Airlines Frequent Flyer Club. That tells you how important Bitcoin is. I mean, it's a minuscule amount of transactions. Second of all, the Bitcoin people will tell you, look at all the places that accept Bitcoin. In the United States, Dell accepts Bitcoins, and Expedia, the travel website, accepts Bitcoins, and Dish Network, a television cable operation, accepts Bitcoins. Except they don't. That's the interesting thing about it. What happens is when you get on their site and you click Pay with Bitcoins, and it's the same in Australia, you end up getting sent to one of the exchanges, Coinbase or BitPay, or one of the various exchanges. You pay them in Bitcoin, and they pay the company in fiat, in dollars. That's not the same thing as accepting Bitcoin, because actually none of these companies want anything to do with Bitcoin. It's a marketing play, not a Bitcoin endorsement. It's unbelievable, the amount of misinformation.
It's interesting because we had a newspaper report here only yesterday of a seller of vinyl records taking on Bitcoin. Is it better suited to small businesses?
Well, you know, taking Bitcoin, what does that mean? Is he putting it on his books? I doubt that. I suspect that if he takes it, he exchanges it for dollars right away, or he goes through an exchange. Nobody wants this stuff. No, what the retailers are saying is, look, if there are people out there who've been foolish enough to have Bitcoins, let's give them a way to spend it. That's good marketing. But none of these marketing ploys are endorsements of Bitcoin. In fact, they're just a way of drawing in more customers. And I mean, I spoke to a number of the big people who supposedly accept Bitcoins when they don't really. And they all said, no, we're just trying to help our customers spend their money. That's all.
You say Bitcoin is not much good for money laundering.
No.
Is that because of the electronic trail it leads? I mean, some people say it's as good as an audit.
Well, no, not really, because there are ways of making it not anonymous, but pseudonymous, which is what it is, and then you can spin that and become almost anonymous. No, it's not good for money laundering simply because if you can put your drug money, you collect $5 million on the streets of Sydney, and you put it into Bitcoin, if you could even get that amount of money into Bitcoin without raising suspicions, and you then transfer it frictionlessly and quickly to Colombia to pay the suppliers, what has he got at the other end? He's simply got $5 million in street money at the other end once he gets out of Bitcoin. So it doesn't actually transform the money the way you have to do with money laundering. What it does is it's capital flight, it's tax evasion, and it's ways of moving money around. But you have to go through this phony currency, this pretend currency, Bitcoin, to do it. What's happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem is the Silicon Valley and entrepreneurs in Australia and entrepreneurs in Europe are creating businesses on the back of what's called the blockchain, which is also called Bitcoin, just to make things really confusing, which is the technology. And you take the blockchain technology, which is brilliant, and you build a business on the back of it, and you'll be able to move dollars. And you could send dollars to England, which immediately gets converted into pounds. This is all coming for very little money and frictionlessly. That's the future, is the technology. The pretend currency is a charade, and the pretend commodity, this trading of Bitcoins, now I think it was 375 US dollars today. It was up to 1,200 at one point. That's all a pump and dump. That's a very few people running the price up, finding greater fools to buy the Bitcoins, then dropping the price by selling, wiping them out, running it up again to get the next batch.
Now, Bitcoin supporters say there's a lot of transparency in the system, and they totally reject these allocations. It's some kind of Ponzi scheme.
Well, of course, it's not a Ponzi. It's a self-fulfilling Ponzi, and it's a pump and dump is what it is. Not a question of that. Look, there are 13 million Bitcoins in circulation at the moment. Over 50% of them, some 6.5 million Bitcoins, are owned by about 950 people. That's nothing. This is a very shallow market. This is not a liquid market. This is a market where people run up the price by buying. These big consortium can buy, run up the price, and then dump it on the poor fools who thought they were going to get rich quick. This is not a way to get rich quick. This is not an investment. This is a loaded roulette wheel.
You do like the blockchain technology underpinning Bitcoin.
Yeah.
A recent review in the FT said, yeah, the technology is interesting, but that the real beauty is that the clearing costs are all transferred to the user.
Well, of course they are. You don't think that that somebody's going to do this for charity. I mean, this is quite definitely to get the user. But the thing about the blockchain technology that is so fascinating, for example, you will have a smart contract. They're building these businesses which will create a smart contract. You sell me your car, and we put the contract and the deed on the blockchain so that it is absolutely irrefutable. And we arrange for payments, and I decide to pay you in 3 payments. So I pay you in 1. This is all done on the blockchain. And then I take the car from you in Sydney, and I drive to Perth and disappear, and I don't make the second payment. You get on the blockchain, you push a button, and the ignition in the car turns off. It's called a smart contract, which will enforce the rules of the contract automatically off the blockchain. I won't be able to drive the car because I haven't made the second payment. That's great stuff.
If this is a game changer, this technology, what sort of players could be threatened down the track?
Well, the bugbear, the Bitcoin faithful, as I call them, really hate Western Union because they come up with things like saying, well, if you want to transfer money from Melbourne back to the old country, it's going to cost you 30%. And if you're a poor African immigrant and you want to send money back to Somalia, it's going to cost you 30%. No, that's nonsense. It will cost you a percentage, and it will be cheaper on the blockchain, but then you have to go into Bitcoin to do it. As soon as they can separate Bitcoin from the technology, the whole Bitcoin problem, the pretend currency and the commodity just dies. People get wiped out if they're holding on to it. And it will be cheaper because you'll be able to go from dollars right into Somali shillings or into pounds or anything without the huge cost.
Do you see a time when Bitcoin will just blow up, and how will it happen?
It'll happen for a bunch of reasons. One, what happens with most people holding Bitcoins, they've got some, they've been playing with it. And once they spend it, they don't reinvest in it because it's illogical to reinvest in it. Why would you take Australian dollars, buy Bitcoins to pay for things that are priced in Australian dollars? Putting Bitcoin in the middle serves no purpose. So people spend down what they've got and then don't buy any more. Second of all, the venture capitalists are building systems that won't use the currency, this pretend currency. So once it's not necessary for the blockchain to operate, why would anybody get into it? And third of all, people are starting to realize the currency is a charade, and the commodity aspect of it is a pump and dump, and that with Bitcoin, what you see is not what you get.
Well, you make it all so vivid. Jeffrey Robinson, thank you very much for joining us there.
My pleasure, anytime.